Hey y'all, Will here, otherwise Zelray, and today I want to talk about some contention points within Once Human. The past couple days has had a lot of people tea-kettling over two major issues, but there are more issues than that in the background that people still mention quite often. Going over the main points I want to cover, number one, scenario transitions and how difficult it is to bring communities through these transitions. Number two, loot crates and the perception that the community has on the game when it comes to marketing. Number three, how they're doing normal and hard mode and the potential rewards for these servers and how they don't align with what people would have as a idea of what to expect. Number four, general weapon balancing. In many ways, this is one of the biggest things that I have concerns with. And number five, how the game has good structure and bones, and while meat is being added to these bones, there needs to be more extra padding, essentially, to give players something to do as they finish the content that is the main draw of the scenarios as quickly as they do. You can go through the timeline and choose which section you want to listen to. On top of that, what's playing in the background is the new pro mode of Forsaken Giant on the hard mode servers and how many things that they added to it. I think it's really awesome if you pay attention to that. It's not relevant to the video at all, but it does show that the game is producing content and rehashing content to make it better as we go along. To finish out this intro, I do want to say that this isn't meant to be a negative video. This is meant to be a constructive video. And these are going over some negative portions of the game when I feel overall the game is going in a positive direction within its development. And if you have any contention point that isn't mentioned here, or you want to talk about these, please leave a comment down below so that if in case someone does read this who is part of the community management and the dev team, they can actually see what people are saying in a better realm than what you normally see on Twitter or the main Discord for Once Human. The first thing on the list, scenario transitions, migrations, whatever you may want to call them. When we leave one server and enter another server, there are a lot of issues that a lot of players have, especially when it comes to trying to play with their friends who weren't able to start playing the game at the same time as they were. One of the things that I don't understand is why do we even have a settlement phase when it doesn't matter? We can't do anything special within the settlement phase except by 4,000 Starcrum with our energy links. Outside of that, it's a wrap-up period, but it doesn't need a whole phase to express itself as such. Not only that, but the settlement phase, I feel, should allow us to settle back into Eternal Land so we don't have to do that once we start the new scenario, the new campaign. We should be able to finish up all our inventory management and sorting before we ever enter the new campaign so we're not having to do two things at once. I think potentially the developers don't understand that day one content is so important to so many players. People want to experience the new thing when it releases, and without allowing people to experience that, it removes the luster of the experience in the first place. It's one of the worst things about social media content creation that we have in today's society is if you aren't there when it first releases, everyone already knows about it and it no longer feels special. A great way to do this, in my opinion, is take a main timeline, which I thought was going to be the day one timeline, but now that is ruined in itself. But take a timeline that is the main timeline, and whenever they hit phase 6, give 4 or 5 days, maybe even a week of time where there's downtime, where people can take fragments of their community from multiple servers and try to join it into one clump as best as they can. I feel that this is so important to keeping the game as alive as possible and bringing more and more people together. One thing that I hear time and time again is I've given up the game Once Human because I have not been able to play with my friends on multiple occasions, and it's too frustrating to continue and try to have fun playing a game that doesn't allow me to play with my friends. People may say, well, why don't they just make an alt? Well, people don't want to re-roll their main character, and when your timelines get so divided where you can't bring your main characters to play with your friends' main characters, one of you has to be gimped because of how important Starcrum really is, it makes it difficult. And people want to have fun with the character that they developed because of the time involved, and they also feel attached to their character. The last point of this topic I wanted to bring up is how we have day one players who have been playing the game avidly, who then joined day one hard mode servers to make sure they wouldn't miss any content because they were worried about the fact that if they were any later than that, they might miss when new content releases, only then to feel alienated because what they've been trying so hard to do, which is stay up with content to not miss anything on day one, they are now forced to miss when they thought that they would be able to play it when it released. And this is coming from me as a player, but myself as a content creator, I'm kind of confused, because don't you want your content creators to enjoy playing the game on day one, having fresh experiences, not knowing what to expect, and producing that content for your player base and potentially bringing in new players, instead of them being slightly annoyed at the fact that they missed out on the opportunity where they had to make a brand new character with no gear available to them to actually be able to participate? I personally feel that that's a little bit short-sighted, especially with how much money they have been putting into advertising by content creators recently. Whenever you see big name streamers and YouTubers playing a game that they haven't been playing, and they're all conjoining at one time, most likely there is money involved, and that's not a bad thing. That's how you drum up hype. That's how you bring new people into the population of the game. I understand that, but then to go completely against that core concept and not allow your current active content creators to be able to participate and be able to do the same thing seems somewhat strange. Again, I want to hear your opinions about what I'm saying, and if I'm correct or if I'm not. No ill will, no resentment. I just want to see if I'm thinking the right way. Subject number 2, loot crates and marketing within Once Human. Personally, I cannot stand how they're doing loot crates. They can range from, on the low end, $150 to the high end with the new loot crate of somewhere around $550, $600 just to finish out the loot crate in total. And these happen every 2 weeks. It's insane. And I won't say that they aren't adding things to the standard cash shop store. However, the amount of things that they're putting in the loot crates compared to the other ways they could be putting them into the game is atrocious. Again, in my opinion, atrocious. I'm all for companies making as much money as they possibly can. However, what can easily get in the way of that is when the audience that is being targeted feel like the company is being greedy. That perception of greed is terrible, and will absolutely make people fall away from purchasing the products that has had so much time put into it from the team that is in charge of cosmetics. I would love to see more in-game cosmetics that are free but earned as well. We don't have enough of these, and overall it'd be great to add them to things that don't have great replayability. The game currently has a problem where when you're playing it and you get what you want from a silo dungeon, Leah Labs, whatever it may be, you then don't really have a reason to go back there and do it. Injecting those relevant areas with cosmetics that are hard to obtain via random chance, or just by doing things a certain way and then a chance on top of it, would give players a reason to challenge themselves. Not only that, to do something over and over again because they have a potential item to drop that's a collectible, and people will absolutely spend time doing those things. Therefore, you would have more players playing all the time, and you can have more cosmetics being sold through the shop and some through loot crates, yet you wouldn't have to try to prioritize putting the biggest money item at the start of a scenario like what we're seeing right now with the current loot crate, which is more expensive than any other loot crate has been. On top of that, if they try to pull this again when Way of Winter releases, you're going to have an even bigger backlash. This has been an issue that has been brewing and bubbling for quite a couple months now because they've been releasing loot crates too often, absolutely too often. There needs to be more store items, and then that would have alleviated itself. They started the game with loot crates that had 150 pulls to achieve all the items you could get from it. Later on, they went down to a loot crate that had 90 pulls, and that felt a lot more reasonable for how often they were coming out. And now, just right around the corner from that, now we have a loot crate with 300 pulls, which is insane. It really is. I think what would be fair to most players if they wanted monthly loot crates, which is 12 a year, having 90 to 120 pulls per month seems fair to the audience, the player base that is, and also the company. 150 pulls felt good if it was every other month, but they can get away with slightly less pulls monthly. If they're doing these giant 300 pull loot crates, if they do want to continue with this, they need to make them once, twice, 3 times a year at most. And they need to be very careful about how they do it, because it's a lot of money invested in just one of these loot crates if you're a collector. That sums up really the monetary side of Once Human and the downfalls I see with it. Going on to the third topic at hand, the current difficulty scaling within Once Human. The novice servers were absolutely easy. I think a lot of people understood that. Some people did find it slightly challenging, but for veterans of this genre, it definitely wasn't. And then we had later on the normal and hard modes come out. And a lot of us flocked to hard modes to see how difficult it would be, but more importantly, to see what rewards we would get from doing the most challenging content. Now, while the content itself was harder, I don't think it was much more challenging, and really what we got in hard mode is the gimmick of super anomalies. And I say it's a gimmick because we have to change and alter the build that we want to play as a player, and then deal the same amount of damage to enemies that it could have had a completely different fun mechanic instead. Now, some players do want to change their build for that 10, 15, 20% damage advantage. That is a-okay, but players do not like changing their build to just play the game. And what's even worse is with this mechanic, it is completely skippable. You can skip every super anomaly you see in the game if you want to, so why do we have it in the first place? Not only that, people want to skip it because they're harder than most silo bosses, they eat up more of your time, and they don't even offer a legitimate, suitable reward for the time being wasted. The current super anomalies are a speed bump. They're not a roadblock. They're not a door that you have to open. You don't have to face them. And not only that, when you do face them, you're slapped with no reward, wasted ammo, and wasted time. That needs to be changed. And on top of that, the mechanic that they have to become super anomalies needs to be more rigid within the structure of the game standardly. Instead of it ultimately being decided by weapon damage or status damage of specific types, they could have made it so that you had to use a throwable weapon on these enemies to be able to break their shield, or you had to land headshots to break their shield. You could have made these mechanics so that everyone could have played their own part in helping defeat them, and if you gave them better rewards, then it would have been even better. Maybe if you don't hit the enemy with a headshot, it can spawn a explosive that then you have to dodge. So really, if you do face these enemies, you have to focus on making sure you hit headshots. There's so many mechanics that you could have chosen that are fun and interesting and challenging potentially, rather than making it a gimmick of you have to use X, Y, or Z gun or X, Y, or Z damage to be able to go forward with even fighting this enemy that ultimately has no reward at all that is significant to you playing. On top of that, I'm not saying that we should receive better rewards for being in hard mode, but maybe at minimum we should receive more chances at getting the same reward. Because really, when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, we do silos for the most part, and we do bosses for the most part to receive mods for our armor and for our guns. Outside of that, we don't really have a use for silos or bosses outside of experiencing them for the first time. Therefore, if we had more chances at obtaining a decent mod, we would be happy as players to do hard mode, because we see that our extra efforts are being rewarded with extra rewards. I don't think anyone necessarily wanted to get better modifications. We just wanted more chances at getting something that would be suitable, so we wouldn't be wasting our controllers all day trying to hunt for that one modification. Either way, I think that hard mode targeted removing fun from the players by forcing them to alter their builds to deal with a mechanic that ultimately didn't reward them. And that is the problem. I personally think hard modes, pro modes, anything above normal mode is wanted by the player base, but the player base that wants that difficulty wants to be rewarded for dealing with that difficulty. They don't want it to be difficult just to be difficult. They want it to be difficult so that they have more opportunities to build their character in a way to min-max them, to face a challenge that is worthwhile of their min-maxing. I know I'm a little bit more hard-headed on this topic, and I would actually prefer to hear criticism on my points so that I can see how far off the line I am compared to other people who are looking for a challenge. Do people want things to be harder just to be harder? I don't think so. I think people want to rise to a challenge to be rewarded for completing that challenging content. And on to a perfect segue to weapon balancing. This is topic number 4. And why I bring this up is because I've seen people work their ass off on making a legitimate build for weapons that have no legitimate use, and they have found that out the hard way. Now, I'm not saying don't play the gun that you enjoy. I think that you should build that because I believe that the development team will balance guns in a meaningful way in the near future. I really hope that they do. Yet when someone spends their resources and their time with the combined mental strength of multiple people who make builds on the regular, and that build can only come up to 25,000 damage per second, on a legendary rarity gun, mind you, legendary quality. It's a gold gun. It should be doing more than that. And I can come up with a purple gun and triple their damage without batting an eye on a build that was relatively easy to make, and a build that has multiple steps to make it better further because I did not min-max it. It's a very hard pill to swallow for the person who just spent all that star crumb and all that time trying to make that build as good as they could. I believe there should be a baseline damage for guns, where guns with a proper build base, 5 stars, ready to go, everything perfect, outside of food buffs and buffs from other players, should probably never hit above 100,000 or at 100,000 maximum. From there, then you have a place to balance guns from. You can say that if anything egregiously goes over that number, we need to scale it down. And if anything is underwhelming compared to that number, we need to scale it up. That way players know when they start building a gun, they have that potential to be able to do that amount of damage when everything has been perfected. And people feel confident that they're playing a gun in their style that is still allowing them to be competitive with the other players. And this is absolutely important because our current wish shop system for getting guns is very straightforward. You can buy a gun outright and then you just wait to upgrade it as often as you can. And if everyone only wants to play one gun because everyone yells at them, not everyone, but I've seen many people yell at other players because they were playing a build that was too suboptimal compared to what people thought the standards of damage should be. That absolutely needs to be addressed and fixed in some meaningful way. Now, my opinion on how that should be fixed might not be correct, but there needs to be some semblance of balance number-wise, and then the effects can give you the special abilities of the gun and make you feel unique. I think that'd be a great way to go forward with gun balancing, because it really feels that you have some great guns and everything else just pales in comparison competitively, even though they might be an awesome idea in general. Finally, I want to talk about subject number 5, which is this game, Once Human, has great bones and structure to build a fantastic game off of, and they have been building a game that gets better and better over time. Yet there are some sticky points that are, I think, the main player base's contention, and I think I got most of them covered. And I say this game is getting better because it really is. When we look at what we're getting as players, we're getting a lot of additions so quickly, and that is a great thing to see. We're going to be seeing new Eternaland things in the future here soon. We're going to be getting a whole new map with Way of Winter. Those 2 things are within about 3 months from release. On top of that, we've had the ranching updates, 2 of them now, to make it so that animals are capturable, breedable, and also they have special skins and rarities to go with them. That's a huge thing to add. Our deviations have now gotten special morphs so that we can farm more types and have fun collecting them. There have been many great additions to the game since launch, and a lot of great fixes to the game since launch. I just want to make sure that these sticking points are addressed and seen, and we have a way to vent our frustrations in a constructive way that then hopefully the devs will see, because I have heard from community managers within Once Human's Discord itself that people are scouring content that does get seen by a high population. And I think this would be a great way, if this is seen, to be able to really pinpoint these factors in a constructive way so that maybe they can get fixed sooner than later. And that's the video right there. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. And if you have heard anything in this video that caught your interest, please start a discussion down below in the comments so that we can have a big presence if this is a good way to be constructive and not too negative on the things that are frustrating to people. I know it's super easy to be aggressive when frustrated with topics that are close to your heart if you're enjoying a game and you want to see it successful. However, when that happens, usually it's seen in a worse manner than it's supposed to be taken. Again, thank you for your time. Later.